The story didn't make it to the news right away. I was just informed that a guy with a metal detector had found bones on the beach, but considering the state that they were in, he wasn't sure if that they were humans or animals. The forensic team made their way to the beach and took all the necessary pictures before pocketing the bones in different bags for the lab to analyze. Unsurprisingly, they weren't animal bones. Now, the question remained. How long had these bones been there? There were several possibilities explaining the presence of bones on the shore, none of which had a very nice story attached to it. The bones could have been buried on the beach and unearthed after several years due to the ever-changing tides. Someone received a nice pair of cement boots, and once the fishes were done picking the skeleton, some waves could have moved them closer to the beach. Bones don't float, but with a strong enough current, who knows how far they can travel? And since we didn't retrieve a whole skeleton, well, unfortunately, even after analyzing all the results, nothing very conclusive came. According to our specialists, the bones had been lying on that beach for less than 24 hours. They had been picked clean, but there were no signs of aging, water damage, or anything that would indicate that they had been buried. It was like someone killed somebody, ripped the skeleton clean out of their body, and just dropped the bones on the beach. Crazy, right? Well, that's what we all thought. And that's exactly why I didn't want the job of doing some beach night surveillance. I was already having trouble sleeping at home because the baby kept me awake. I didn't want to leave my wife alone with the newborn either. I promised her that I was going to help her as much as I could. And yet, I had to tell her that I was picked for a night shift. I told her I would work twice as hard to get it done, and she understood, but she always did. I just felt like I was letting her down again. I would try to make it up for her. Without her knowing, I notified my boss that after this job, I was going to take a short vacation. Just 10 days with the wife in a resort so that we could relax. I called my parents, and then her parents, and arranged for them to have the baby 5 days each. We could prepare some baby bottles and formula. And when I say she's a newborn, she's actually 3 months old. I know my wife would freak out leaving her for 10 days, but if my parents managed to raise me fine and a decent man, and her parents managed to make her such a great wife, I'm pretty sure they could handle 5 days with their granddaughter. And my wife and I were exhausted, physically, emotionally, and mentally. Taking care of a baby that's just out of the oven is a full-time job. Even my job as a detective wasn't as demanding. I always thought stay-at-home parents deserved a wage. Anyway, I took the job. Well, I didn't have much choice. But I had to drive an hour and a half every night to get to that godforsaken beach, and park my car on the hill not too far from it, and keep watch. See if there was anything illegal going on there. A section of the beach had been closed by my colleagues in case more bones washed up on the shore, but we weren't expecting it to happen. Not with the results the forensics team gave. I was more expecting to see a couple of rough-looking dudes dropping a bag of bones, you know? In any case, I had the worst job of the case, which was just to stay and watch for a few nights. 5 nights, that is. This was all they wanted to attribute to the case. After that, we would likely end up having to close the investigation unless new elements were reported. But the bones had already told us most of what they could tell us. 2 a.m. Armed with caffeine and sheer willpower, I stare at the empty beach. Nothing's happening. There's not a soul in sight, just some tiny waves brushing up the shorelines repeatedly, making that wishy-washy sound that just begs me to fall asleep. I'm almost tempted to go down there and check for clues we might have missed in the day, but I couldn't. Can't tamper with the crime scene at night, even if my upper lids weigh a ton, and that would keep me awake. Unfortunately for my boss, he probably forgot I had a baby recently, and that new parents are exhausted. And I think I fell asleep at 3-something in the morning, despite the impressive amount of caffeine rushing through my veins. When I woke up, it was past 5. I heard a scream, and when I looked toward the beach, all I could see was that the water had turned black and gooey, as if there had been an oil spill. I thought my mind was playing a trick on me, when I saw a wave of that black oil moving further onto the beach and spitting bones left and right. I closed my eyes for a second, and when I reopened them, the black mass was returning to the sea. Fuck tampering with the scene. I had to go check. There was a presumption of danger or something like that. I mean, I did hear a scream, and though the flying bones probably meant there was no one to save anymore, I needed to see. It took me a little under 2 minutes to climb down the hill and reach the beach. I saw the sun starting to peak on the horizon, and the black mass was nowhere in sight. I retrieved the bones rather easily, and again, they looked as if they had been carefully cleaned, though the smallest were missing, just like the other skeleton we'd found the other day. In the corner of my eyes, I saw something move. I thought it was a rat or something. It was about the same size, and it looked dark gray. It was only when I turned around and noticed that it wasn't a rat. It was a strange creature, something none too far of a jellyfish, but if you crossed it with a blobfish, something that definitely looked like it would live in the depth of the ocean. It was dragging itself toward the shore, seemingly painfully, and somehow I knew I had to stop it. I had to keep it intact for the lab to analyze. I kicked it further from the water to make sure it wouldn't have time to get in the water if I had to run back to my car. You see, I only had a sandwich bag with my lunch in it. This would have to do. I picked a pair of pliers from the trunk, because there was no way in hell I was touching that thing with my bare hands. Unfortunately, when I came back, I found the thing dead on the beach. It was entirely dehydrated and at this point, looked like a weird-ass flattened starfish. I still picked it up and shoved it in the bag, then called my station to tell them about the new bones. I omitted the talk about the blast mass yet. This I would need to prove so that they don't think I slept on the job and hallucinated or something. When the higher-ups arrived with their forensic team, I showed them the sandwich bag. Hey, I found this with the bones. This might be worth looking into. It was alive and fresh when I found it, but 5 minutes later it looked like that. Yeah, this didn't sound crazy at all. They asked me if I'd seen anything unusual on the beach, and I said I saw someone walking, heard a scream, and by the time I reached the beach, there was nothing but bones. I did tell them I thought the waves looked different, but when they asked me to explain, I said the water looked darker than usual, but that I wasn't certain since I never walked on a beach at night. I just wasn't sure. I told them that I would check again tonight. They asked me if I'd seen anything else, and if I had anything that would explain why a person turned to bones. I said no, that it happened in a blink of an eye, which wasn't exactly false and it would make them suspicious, but not enough that they'd question my sanity yet. But maybe I was looking into this too deeply, and should have told them what I had seen. But even I wasn't sure what to believe anymore. I came back home that day and tried to sleep, but only managed to get a few hours. When I woke up, I was still just as exhausted as the night before. I took my coffee while watching the 6 o'clock news, and they were finally talking about the beach. Couldn't keep the media off too long after all. A whole section of the beach was closed. However, just like us, they didn't have much information. Bones were found on the beach, and people were advised not to go walk at night until the police was done with the investigation. Let me tell you, the dark circles under my eyes weighed a ton. But by 11, I was ready to go for another night shift. I didn't fall asleep that night. Nothing happened either. No one walked on the beach. The sea did turn black, but it only stayed for a few minutes. When I went to shore, there were no other creatures. When my shift ended, I went back to the station and asked about the bag thing I'd given them. Forensic lead told me that they were still analyzing it, but said that they'd never seen something like that before. Said it was similar in all points to the Portuguese man-o-war jellyfish, but it definitely didn't look like one. They tried rehydrating it, but the deep black color of the animal didn't suggest it was a man-o-war. They deduced it was a new species, but something was off. Man-o-war lived mostly at the surface of the ocean, mostly in Australia, South Africa, and New Zealand. Very rarely are they carried near the United States, and yet, here we were. These man-o-war stings are not deadly, but highly venomous still. However, the forensics didn't find the venom gland in the animal yet, which just made it all stranger. They did discover a high pH level and a weird pouch in its stomach, with faint traces of acid. But it just might be another stomach. Further research was needed. And I needed to go back to the beach for another night. On the third night, I was well rested, alert, and ready for some action. Not that I wanted to find Bones again, mind you, but we needed to understand what the hell was happening on that beach. It was nearly 5 in the morning when I saw a couple holding hands and walking romantically along the shoreline. I got out of my car and speed walked toward them to warn them off the beach. Didn't they see the signs? The beach was closed. Didn't they even hear the news? And then I saw the sea turning black, and I knew what was going to happen. In a matter of seconds, the mass was advancing threateningly fast toward the couple. I shouted at the top of my lungs at them. I screamed at them to run, but the noise of the waves and the black mass rushing at them engulfed my voice. I saw the woman turn her face toward me seconds before she disappeared under the wave of black. I knew I shouldn't have, but I ran towards the beach as fast as I could as the couple's screams were drowned out. I could hear the sound of skin tearing, vessels snapping, and blood spilling. Within a fraction of a second, bones were flying left and right again. I'd seen piranha documentaries and thought they were the fastest carnivorous creatures on Earth, until I saw this. I reached the beach, held my breath, grabbed my gun, and fired at the black mass until there were no more rounds left to fire. I heard screeches and growls, and the black mass turned its attention towards me. Just like I thought, it wasn't a black mass. It was 1,000,000 of those creepy little monstrous black creatures I found the other night. My blood turned to ice as I saw them rush toward me. If I was a little less healthy than I am, I would have ended up bones on the beach myself. I ran back toward the hill and climbed as fast as I could, and once I was on the safety of the higher ground, I realized that the creatures had stopped chasing me and was now dashing back towards the sea. The first rays of sun were poking out on the horizon, and the incessant, otherworldly screeching coming out of those creatures was telltale enough of their dislike of the sun. But I wasn't going to let them all back in the sea. By this time, I came prepared. I picked up a few containers from my passenger's seat and dashed back to the beach. Filled them with water and trapped a few of these black things in the water so that they wouldn't dehydrate. I wasn't prepared enough and I forgot gloves, but I didn't care. I grabbed them with my bare hands and shoved as many as I could in containers for the lab to analyze them. When I stopped packing them in containers, my hands were burned in several places, and not jellyfish kind of burn. Burned, though. Adrenaline was keeping me from panicking and feeling pain, and I used this opportunity to call an ambulance in the station, and they sent the team again. I think it's only when the adrenaline wore off that I realized I'd just seen a couple be devoured by something from the sea, and that my hands were bleeding profusely. I guess shock prevented me from truly realizing what was happening. The beach was permanently closed, and the guards were stationed up on the hill where I watched the creatures eat their way through humans, and on the other side too, to prevent anyone foolish or curious enough to wander on that beach again. At least 4 people had lost their lives in the past week due to those things, and not a drop of blood on the beach, despite the carnage. How did they do that? Not a single drop of blood stained the sands of that beach, and yet, the bones were picked clean. When I came back from the hospital with bandaged hands, they told me I was off the case. The case moved to higher-ups. When I asked if Simon got it, my employer made a higher-up motion. The FBI agents came to our office and made us sign a bunch of NDAs, and we were told the bare minimum. That these things were man-made.